With this kind of information, Avendaño and 9 other moms from the Tacoma area decided to take on the problem of asthma triggers in daycares. They started by visiting small, unlicensed daycare centers and surveying their conditions. Elsa Trujillo is one of the moms.
One of the daycares I visited was really small, and the windows were always closed. At the end of the survey, we said, look, you have to open the windows every day for at least half an hour, and the cleaning products you use are also very important. They hadn't known these things. I think our advice helped.
In a trailer park southeast of Tacoma, a 2-year-old is building a house out of child-sized chairs and sheets of cardboard that are bigger than he is. This playhouse is inside a trailer home belonging to Araceli Martinez. Martinez takes care of 4 kids. She charges $3 an hour per child. Martinez says when she first started running the daycare, she didn't know much about what could trigger an asthma attack.
You should wash sheets and stuffed animals regularly because they gather a lot of dust.
Martinez says the moms taught her a lot about how to keep her house free of asthma triggers.
And it's better to use organic cleaning products. And if you use Clorox, measure small amounts.
Public health researchers in New York and Florida have studied similar programs to train daycare providers there, and they found the programs reduced asthma hospitalizations among toddlers. The moms in Tacoma say they hope public health departments here will start their own asthma inspections and education for daycare providers so the program can scale up. In Tacoma, I'm Alicia O'Neill for Marketplace.
This final note on the way out today from the I Do Not Like It Sam I Am file. I'm not quite sure how I missed this, but Netflix, it seems, has a new show dropping this fall, a reinterpretation of the Dr. Seuss classic Green Eggs and Ham. Ellen DeGeneres produces. The voices of Tracy Morgan, Diane Keaton, Michael Douglas, Alana Glazer, and Daveed Diggs, among others, starred. Here, though, is the thing I don't get. The book takes, 5 minutes to read aloud, tops? Netflix, 13 episodes.
Is supported by Boston Beer Company, brewing Samuel Adams Boston Lager with hops that come from a small German farm that's been growing hops for over 200 years. Boston Beer Company, Boston, Mass., promoting responsible drinking. And by One Drop, the all-in-one solution for people with diabetes. Supplies are home delivered and personal coaches help lower blood sugars. More at getonedrop.com. And by Indiana University. They're leading a state-based initiative to prevent and treat opioid addiction, one designed to be largest in the nation. Learn more at progress.iu.edu.
All right, we are out of here. The Dow Industrial's up 63 points today, about 0.25%. NASDAQ basically flat. The S&P 500 gained 4 points, about 0.1% there. Our media production team includes Sarah Bergere, Jake Gorski, Drew Jostek, Jeff Peters, Dan Powell, Daniel Ramirez, Charlton Thorpe, and Ben Tolliday. I'm Kai Risdall. We will see you tomorrow, everybody. This is APN.
WNYC is supported by the Vilcek Foundation, honoring immigrant contributions to America. The 2019 Vilcek Foundation prizes honor molecular biologist Angelica Amann, chef Marcus Samuelson, and art historian Carmen Bombach. More at vilcek.org.
All Things Considered continues after news headlines here on WNYC. And coming up tomorrow, President Trump's top trade negotiator, Robert Lighthizer, grew up in a small Ohio town. Afternoon, state officials and emergency management in New York City deployed hundreds of salt spreaders and plows to tackle the slushy streets. A judge has agreed to postpone the start of Michael Cohen's prison sentence by 2 months. New York Judge William Pauley approved the delay for President Trump's former fixer and attorney today after Cohen's lawyers said he needed more time to recover from shoulder surgery and prepare for congressional testimony. Cohen is scheduled to testify before the House Intelligence Committee next week. A New Jersey family is planning to sue a school district in Sussex County and its superintendent after their 18-year-old son was allegedly taunted with racist slurs during a basketball game last week. Ashawn Dickerson says his son Nashir, the only black player on his team, was playing against Wallkill Valley Regional High School and had to endure racist slurs from the crowd. He says his family is suing because school officials did nothing.
Can you imagine how I felt I was there with my mother, my wife, and my daughter. I'm extremely very upset.
The superintendent did not respond to a request for comment. A statement on the school's website says the district is undertaking a thorough investigation. When freshman state senator Andrew Gennardis ran for office last year against incumbent Marty Golden for a South Brooklyn district, he was critical of Golden for funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars to a catering hall owned by his own family. Now Gennardis wants to make that kind of self-dealing illegal.
We're saying enough is enough. The time has come here in New York to close this egregious loophole and to prohibit people from being bad actors and really enriching themselves at the cost of doing the public good.
He's introduced a bill he calls the Golden Rule. According to campaign finance records, Golden, who could not be reached for comment, spent more than $800,000 at a catering hall he and his family own. Currently 29 degrees. We're expecting temperatures to start to go up overnight, and the snow will shift over to all rain. It's 7:06.
Support for NPR comes from Focus Features, presenting Everybody Knows, starring Javier Bardem and Penelope Cruz. When a woman returns home to the Spanish countryside, a mysterious disappearance threatens to expose deep secrets. Now playing in select theaters.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Ari Shapiro.
And I'm Mary Louise Kelly. If all goes to plan, 1 week from today, President Trump will be in Hanoi, Vietnam, preparing to sit down for a second summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. So far, this one is coming together with decidedly less drama than the first time these two met. You may recall just days before last year's summit in Singapore, Trump called it off, and then suddenly it was back on. This time, Trump's tone is less heated, and on the substance and the central U.S. demand that North Korea give up nuclear weapons, the president has been tempering expectations.
As long as there's no testing, I'm in no rush. If there's testing, that's another deal. But there has been no testing.
So where does that leave expectations for this summit? In our studio to discuss is Frank Aum. He was senior advisor for North Korea at the Defense Department during the Obama administration. Welcome.
Good to be here.
So start with what we just heard from the president. First, just a quick fact check. He's right. There's been no testing since the Singapore summit, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And when you hear him say he's in no rush, what should we read into that?
Well, I'm speculating here, but I think he is trying to create the impression that he is not desperate for denuclearization, that he can walk away from a deal if it's not good for the U.S. I don't think that was the best way to phrase it, because it sends the wrong message that the U.S. government is okay with a nuclear North Korea as long as it doesn't conduct provocations.
I was going to ask, isn't he desperate for North Korea to denuclearize? I mean, that has been the U.S. position for many years now when negotiating with North Korea, was the complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization.
Well, I think President Trump certainly is looking for a foreign policy victory, and it's interesting that you've seen a radical shift in his policy towards North Korea over the last 6 months. And I think that's probably actually a helpful indication of what's to come at Hanoi.
Explain that. What's the radical shift you've seen?
So previous administrations and the Trump administration, at least earlier on, had always said that they demanded denuclearization from North Korea first before they would be willing to discuss peace and normalization. But in the remarks from Stephen Biegun, who's the special representative for North Korea, he made remarks at Stanford a few weeks ago, and he said that the U.S. is committed to pursuing denuclearization, but also peace talks in parallel, and that would be a marked shift from the policy that we've pursued in the past.
So if I'm hearing you right, it sounds as though, in your view, the U.S. is walking into this summit with a radically different starting point than it did last year at the Singapore summit.
Before the Singapore summit, President Trump described it by saying that it would be a get-to-know-you meeting plus. So, and that sounded very superficial, just establishing a relationship with Kim Jong-un. So I actually had very low expectations out of Singapore. We're now 8 months later. I think a lot of the ideas have had a chance to marinate a little bit more. We're hearing more reports about potential concessions from both sides that give us a little more optimism going into Hanoi.
With that as backdrop, what does the U.S. want from this summit in Vietnam next week? What would count as a U.S. win?
Tangible outcomes. So we need to see something that demonstrates that North Korea is denuclearizing. One, I think right off the bat, is to reaffirm their dismantlement of their nuclear test site at Punggye-ri and the missile test site at Tongchang-ri. Also, the permanent dismantlement of their main nuclear facility. That would be a big step. To go even further, a commitment to freeze or cap their production of fissile material and ballistic missiles. That would be a significant win for us as well.
What does North Korea want?
right now their main interest is to get some sanctions relief. I don't think we need to give up all of the sanctions immediately or dismantle it, but I think it would be helpful to get some initial steps. Also, they would very much appreciate a declaration confirming that the Korean War is officially over. That would be something that Kim Jong-un could take to his domestic public to convince them that there's a new environment on the peninsula.
So bottom line, you said you were skeptical about the Singapore summit. Where are you a week or so out from Vietnam?
Well, I think it's a fool's choice to be too optimistic about progress, especially in the context of North Korea. But I don't think we need to swing for the fences here. I think a single is good enough. As long as we keep the rally going for diplomatic momentum, I think that would be a success.
Frank former senior Pentagon advisor. He's now with the U.S. Institute of Peace. Thank you.
Thank you.
When President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un discuss denuclearization in Hanoi, they are likely to focus on one North Korean nuclear facility in particular. NPR's Jeff Brumfield introduces us to it.
It's called the Yongbyon Nuclear Research Center.
This is really the oldest, best-known nuclear facility in all of North Korea.
Jeffrey Lewis is a scholar at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies at Monterey.
You know, it's basically a small city. There's quite a lot of housing for scientists and workers. There are many facilities,
including a nuclear reactor that can produce plutonium, a giant facility designed to extract and purify that plutonium, and a separate modern facility filled with centrifuges for enriching uranium. Plutonium and uranium are both used in nuclear bombs. Sig Hecker is a former nuclear weapons scientist now at Stanford University. He's one of the few Westerners who's visited Yongbyon, and he says it's pretty Spartan.
Yeah, most important part of it is cold. This was January in Yongbyon, and particularly what was striking, it was colder inside the buildings than outside the buildings.
On other trips, Hecker saw scientists growing their own vegetables and using primitive safety equipment while working in potentially dangerous areas, but he is convinced that Yongbyon is effective at producing material for nuclear weapons.
These facilities may be old, but they're functional. And the people were professional and very competent.
If the North does give up Yongbyon, as it suggested it might in statements,
they would significantly curtail their abilities to continue the nuclear weapons program. Of course, it doesn't mean that they're giving up their bombs, because I'm quite certain the bombs are not in Yongbyon.
Hecker estimates North Korea's current nuclear arsenal at several dozen weapons that are stored somewhere else. North Korea is also believed to have covert facilities where it can make uranium for nuclear weapons. On top of all that, it's not clear what giving up Yongbyon would mean. Last year, North Korea closed its underground nuclear test site by dynamiting the entrances in front of foreign journalists. But foreign inspectors were never allowed to examine the site first. Jung Pak with the Brookings Institution says that North Korea is paranoid about foreigners.
North Korea does not want people running around their country looking at their nuclear facilities or their missile facilities.
But Yongbyon is a big, technically complex site. It can't just be blown up. Pak believes that any deal should include inspections.
It would be a big change and a good signpost of North Korean sincerity on denuclearization if they did allow inspectors into their facilities.
Those inspectors would probably be let in exchange for some kind of sanctions relief and perhaps a peace declaration between North Korea and the U.S., which have remained formally at war since an armistice in 1953. For now, Jeffrey Lewis says the satellite photos indicate the reactor is running, making more plutonium for nuclear bombs.
You know, it's really business as usual at Yongbyon at the moment. People show up for work and material comes in, and it looks pretty much like it's looked for the last, 10 or 15 years.
It remains to be seen whether a second summit can change that. Jeff Brumfield, NPR News, Washington.
Southwest Airlines canceled more flights today than usual, and not just because of the harsh winter weather sweeping across much of the country. The airline has double the number of planes out of service because of unspecified mechanical issues. As NPR's David Shaper reports, Southwest management is pointing the finger at the airline's mechanics union amid a long-running labor dispute.
Southwest Airlines canceled at least 440 flights today. That's more than 11% of its schedule nationwide. And one of the reasons is that the airline has about 40 planes out of service due to mechanical problems. That's double the normal number at any given time. Experts say it's unusual.
Most of the time, you can predict the types of work that are going to have to be accomplished on an aircraft. That's why airlines use maintenance programs rather than spot maintenance or things like that.
That's Bill Waldock, professor of aviation safety science at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Waldock notes that planes that aren't flying passengers are not making money. So with so many planes grounded, Southwest's chief operations officer declared an operational emergency.
Basically, it's all hands on deck. They want everybody available to try to get the airplane's maintenance as fast as they can.
That means canceling time off and mandatory overtime for mechanics. And in a statement last night, Southwest COO called out the mechanics union, pledging to launch an investigation into why so many planes are being pulled out of service all at once. This statement added that the Aircraft Mechanics Fraternal Association, which represents Southwest's 2,400 mechanics, has a history of work disruptions.
The communication didn't feel very Southwest-like. We always think of Southwest as fun and not as serious.
Brett Snyder writes about the airline industry on his Cranky Flyer blog.
From their perspective, this is something they think is necessary to make sure that the fleet is fixed and flying. But it certainly would be taken by the union as a shot across the bow. It's going to ratchet up tension, I would say.
The airline and the mechanics union have been in contract negotiations for 6 years with no new agreement in sight. As for tension, today the union fired back at management, accusing it of scapegoating maintenance technicians. It characterizes the airline's linking of the operational emergency to contract talks as simply an attempt to divert attention away from the airline's safety issues. So should Southwest passengers be concerned? Brett Snyder says no.
That's just labor negotiations. This is almost a standard pattern. One side will claim safety issues, and the other side will push back, and it's part of the tug of war.
Experts say neither side would ever do anything unsafe, with one saying he'd have no problem getting on a Southwest flight tomorrow. David Schaefer, NPR News.
And you're listening to All Things Considered here on WNYC. I'm David First. Martin Luther King